The first night I heard someone walking above my bedroom, I almost convinced myself it was normal. My house is old. The kind of old where the floors creak when the temperature changes and the pipes knock in the walls. When I first moved in, everyone warned me about it. Old houses make noise, they said. So when I started hearing faint sounds at night, I didn't panic. At first it was subtle. A soft creak somewhere upstairs. A light thump in the ceiling. Sometimes it sounded like something shifting in the walls. I told myself it was the house settling. But the noises kept happening. Every night. And they were getting louder. Around midnight, I would hear slow footsteps moving across the ceiling above my room. Not quick sounds like an animal. Not random pops like old wood. Actual steps. One, then another, then another. Sometimes they would stop directly above my bed. Then they'd start again. Back and forth. Back and forth. The worst part was that I live alone. I started lying awake every night, staring at the ceiling and listening. My heart would pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. I would tell myself it was probably squirrels or raccoons or anything logical. But animals don't pace in straight lines. One night around 2 a.m., the footsteps sounded heavier than ever. Slow, deliberate, like someone walking carefully so the floor wouldn't creak. I sat up in bed and held my breath. The steps stopped. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then I heard something that made my stomach drop. A quiet dragging sound, like something being moved across the attic floor. That was when I remembered something important. The attic access was in the hallway, right outside my bedroom, and I had never opened it. I stayed awake until morning. When sunlight finally came through the windows, I stepped into the hallway. The attic door was slightly open, just a few inches, and I was absolutely certain it had been closed the night before. My hands were shaking as I stared at it. For a long time I just stood there, listening. Nothing. Finally, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen. My heart was pounding so loudly it felt like it echoed in the hallway. Slowly, I pulled the ladder down and climbed up. The attic was dark, dusty, and filled with insulation and old boxes. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness as I stepped carefully across the wooden boards. At first, everything looked normal, just storage. But then the light landed on something in the far corner, and I froze. There was a sleeping bag on the floor. Next to it were several empty food cans. Someone had been living in my attic. The moment my flashlight landed on the sleeping bag, I felt the air leave my lungs. It looked recently used. The fabric wasn't covered in dust like everything else in the attic. The cans next to it were stacked in a small pile: cheap soup, beans, energy drinks. Someone had been eating up here, sleeping up here, watching my house from above. My stomach twisted as I slowly scanned the rest of the attic with the flashlight. There were other things. A plastic grocery bag filled with more canned food, a small flashlight, and an old hoodie folded beside the sleeping bag. Whoever had been living there wasn't just passing through. They had been staying. For how long? I had no idea. My chest tightened as a horrible thought hit me. If someone had been living in my attic, that meant they had been inside my house every single night, just a few feet above me while I slept. I suddenly felt exposed, like I was being watched even in the daylight. I backed toward the ladder slowly, keeping my light on the corner. For a split second, I had the terrifying feeling someone might crawl out from behind the boxes. But nothing moved. I climbed down the ladder as fast as I could and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it while dialing. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 officers searched the house first. Every room, every closet, every window and door. Then they went up into the attic. I stood in the hallway while they checked. Those 5 minutes felt like hours. Finally, one of them climbed down the ladder and looked at me. "Looks like someone was definitely staying up there," he said. My stomach dropped. "Was?" I asked. He nodded. "But nobody's there now." The other officer came down holding one of the empty cans. Probably someone sneaking in through the attic vent or roof, he said. Could have been coming and going while you were out. The idea made my skin crawl. Someone had been living above my head, watching me, listening to me move around the house. And I never knew. Before they left, one of the officers paused in the hallway. He looked toward my bedroom door. Then he looked back at me with a strange expression. "Do you have a camera in your bedroom?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. "No," I said. He hesitated for a moment. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "You might want to check the vent above your bed." For a few seconds, I just stared at him. "The vent," I repeated. The officer nodded slowly. "Just take a look," he said. Then the two of them left. The moment the front door closed, the house felt different. Too quiet, too empty. I stood in the hallway trying to calm my breathing, but my chest felt tight. Every sound in the house suddenly seemed louder. The refrigerator humming, the floor creaking under my feet. Eventually, I forced myself to walk into my bedroom. Nothing looked different. My bed was exactly how I left it that morning. My dresser, my desk, my closet door, everything normal. But now I couldn't stop looking at the ceiling. Right above my bed was the air vent. I had seen it 1,000 times before without thinking about it. But now it felt like it was staring back at me. I grabbed a chair from the kitchen and carried it into the room. My hands were trembling as I set it under the vent. Part of me didn't want to know, but the officer's tone kept echoing in my head. "You might want to check the vent above your bed." I climbed onto the chair and reached up with my flashlight. The vent cover was slightly loose, like it had been removed and put back. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I unscrewed the cover and pulled it down. Dust fell onto the bed below. For a moment, I didn't see anything inside the duct, just darkness. Then my flashlight beam caught something, a small black object taped to the metal inside the vent. My hands started shaking again as I reached in and pulled it out. It was a tiny camera, no bigger than a matchbox. I just stood there on the chair staring at it. My mind was racing. Someone had been living in my attic, directly above my room, and they had placed a camera right above my bed, watching me every night. I felt sick. I grabbed my phone and called the police again immediately. They came back within 15 minutes and took the camera. They searched the attic one more time. Still nothing. No person. Nothing useful. Whoever had been up there was gone. For the next few weeks, I barely slept. Every tiny noise made me jump. Eventually, things started to feel normal again. I installed locks, security cameras, an alarm system. I even sealed the attic hatch completely. Months passed. Nothing strange happened. No signs of anyone. I started convincing myself the person had moved on. Until one night, about 6 months later, I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone when I got a notification. It was from an app one didn't recognize. The message only had one line: "New device connected." Confused, I opened it. The screen loaded for a few seconds. Then a video feed appeared. My stomach dropped instantly. The camera was pointed directly at my bed. The angle looked familiar. I slowly raised my eyes to the ceiling. Right above me, the vent cover was slightly open again. The first time I realized someone was watching me every night, I felt my stomach drop like I just stepped off a cliff. A few months ago, I started noticing a car parked across the street from my house. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. People parked there all the time. My neighborhood was quiet but not empty. Sometimes friends visited neighbors late. Sometimes delivery drivers stopped there. Sometimes people just sat in their cars scrolling through their phones. But this car was different. It was always there at night. Every single night. I started noticing the pattern without even trying. Around 11 p.m., the car would appear across the street, parked under the dim streetlight that flickered every few seconds. And every morning when I woke up, it was gone. At first I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it belonged to someone nearby. Maybe someone worked late shifts. Maybe someone just liked parking there. But then I started paying attention. The car never moved. It never changed spots. And the engine was always off. One night, curiosity got the best of me. I turned off the lights in my bedroom so whoever was outside couldn't see me, then slowly pulled my curtain aside just enough to peek through. The car was there again, a dark sedan, and that's when I noticed something that made my chest tighten. Someone was sitting inside, a man. At first I thought he was on his phone. Most people sitting in parked cars are, but he wasn't. The faint orange glow of the streetlight illuminated part of his face. And he wasn't looking down. He was staring straight ahead. At my house. At my window. I froze. For a few seconds, I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe he was just looking in that direction randomly. But then he moved slightly. Just enough for the light to catch his eyes. Still staring. Directly at me. My heart started pounding so loudly I thought he might somehow hear it through the window. I quickly pulled the curtain closed and stepped back. I stood there in silence, trying to calm my breathing. "Okay," I whispered to myself. "You're overreacting." But something deep in my gut told me I wasn't. Because the next night, the car came back again, and so did the man. After that night, I started checking the street every evening. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop myself. At exactly 11 p.m., like clockwork, the car appeared again. Same spot, same dark sedan. And when I carefully peeked through the curtains, my stomach twisted the same way it had the first night. The man was still there, sitting completely still, watching my house, watching my window. I tried to ignore it for a few nights. I told myself maybe he was just waiting for someone nearby. Maybe he was picking up a night shift worker. Maybe I was just scaring myself for no reason. But then something changed. One night, I turned my bedroom light off earlier than usual. And when I looked outside, the man in the car slowly leaned forward, like he had just noticed my room went dark. That was the moment the fear became real. He wasn't just sitting there randomly. He was watching my routine, watching me. My hands were shaking when I grabbed my phone and called the police. I tried to keep my voice steady while explaining. "There's a car parked outside every night," I told the dispatcher. "And the guy inside just sits there staring at my house." They asked for the car's description and told me an officer would come check it out. But before the police even arrived, the headlights suddenly flicked on. The engine started, and the car drove away, just like that, like he knew I had called. The police showed up about 10 minutes later. By then, the street was empty. The officer walked around the area, knocked on a few neighbors' doors, and even checked nearby streets. But they couldn't find the car anywhere. They told me it was probably someone waiting for a friend. But I could tell they didn't really believe anything serious was happening. After that, the car stopped appearing. For almost a week. And slowly, the fear started fading. Maybe it really had been nothing. Maybe I had just freaked myself out. But then last night happened. I woke up suddenly around 3 a.m. I don't even know what woke me. The house was completely silent. Still half asleep, I turned toward the window out of habit. And for a moment I felt relieved. The car wasn't there. The street was empty. But then I noticed something worse. Something that made every muscle in my body lock up. Someone was standing in my yard, right below my window. A man. And he was looking straight up at me, smiling. I couldn't move. For a few seconds, I just sat there in bed staring at the figure in my yard, trying to convince myself I was still half asleep, that maybe my brain was playing tricks on me. But he didn't move. He just stood there, right below my window, looking up, smiling. The same man from the car. The streetlight barely reached my yard, but it was enough to see his face clearly now. His head tilted slightly to the side, like he was studying me. like he'd been waiting for this moment. My heart started pounding so hard my ears rang. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called the police again. "I think the man is in my yard," I whispered. The dispatcher immediately told me officers were on the way and asked if I could still see him. I slowly leaned toward the window again. He hadn't moved, still staring, still smiling. Then suddenly he lifted his hand and waved at me. I gasped and dropped the curtain immediately, stumbling back from the window like the glass might suddenly shatter. Every instinct in my body screamed not to look again. But after a few seconds, I forced myself to check. Slowly, carefully, I pulled the curtain aside. The yard was empty. He was gone. No gate opening. Nothing. Just silence. When the police arrived, they searched everywhere. The yard, the street, the neighboring houses. But they didn't find anyone. They told me to keep my doors locked and said they'd patrol the area more often. Eventually they left. And around 4 a.m., after checking every lock in the house twice, I finally tried to sleep again. But I couldn't. Something about it didn't make sense. Something felt wrong. Around sunrise, I decided to check my phone again. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A missed notification from my home security app. At 2:58 a.m., it said, "Front door unlocked." My stomach dropped because I live alone, and I never unlock my front door at night. Slowly, with my hands shaking, I opened the camera history from the doorbell. The recording started a few seconds before the alert. First, the porch was empty. Then the front door slowly opened. From the inside, a man stepped out onto the porch. The same man who had been standing in my yard. He looked directly into the camera, smiled, and walked down the steps toward the street. Right before the video ended, he looked back at the camera one last time and whispered something. The audio barely picked it up, but when I turned the volume all the way up, I heard him say, "See you again tonight." The knocking started so quietly that at first I thought I had imagined it. It was just past midnight, and I was home alone. My parents had driven 2 hours away to visit relatives, and I'd insisted I was old enough to stay by myself. The house felt normal all evening, until those knocks came. Slow, soft, 3 gentle taps against the front door. I froze on the couch, remote still in my hand. The TV light flickered across the living room, but the rest of the house was dark and silent. Then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Not loud, not aggressive, just patient. My stomach tightened. No one ever visits our house that late. I muted the TV and slowly stood up. The hardwood floor creaked beneath my feet as I walked toward the door. Every step felt louder than it should have been. "Hello," I called. No answer. Another slow knock. I leaned toward the peephole and looked outside. A man stood on the porch. He looked normal at first glance. Maybe early 30s. He wore a dark jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He wasn't knocking anymore. He was just standing there, perfectly still, facing the door, watching. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Something about the way he stood there felt wrong. Most people would shift their weight, check their phone, or knock again. This man didn't move at all. I stepped away from the door quietly. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe he had the wrong house. Maybe his car broke down. Maybe he needed help. But something deep in my gut told me not to open that door. So I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I checked the peephole again. He was still there. Same position, same stillness, like he hadn't moved a single inch. My heart started pounding. The quiet outside suddenly felt heavy, like the whole night was holding its breath. I took a step closer to the door and raised my voice. "Go away or I'm calling the police." For the first time since he arrived. The man moved, slowly. He stepped closer to the door, and in a calm, quiet voice, he said something that made my blood run cold. "I know you're alone." My heart dropped, because I never told anyone that. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My brain kept trying to explain it away. Maybe he guessed. Maybe he saw my parents leave earlier. Maybe he was just trying to scare me. But the way he said it, calm and certain, made my skin crawl. I stepped back from the door as quietly as possible and grabbed my phone from the coffee table. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed the police. While the phone rang, I kept staring at the door, half expecting the handle to start turning. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man outside my house, I whispered. He's been standing at my front door for like 10 minutes, and he just told me he knows I'm alone. The operator immediately asked for my address and told me officers were on their way. Stay inside. Keep the doors locked. I locked the deadbolt again just to be sure. Then I slowly crept back to the peephole. The porch was empty. My heart skipped. He was gone. For a second, relief washed over me. Maybe calling the police scared him off. But then something worse crossed my mind. Where did he go? I checked the front yard. Nothing. The driveway. Nothing. The street. Still nothing. Just snow covering everything in a quiet white blanket. That's when a horrible thought hit me. If he wasn't in front of the house anymore, he might be somewhere else. I rushed to the living room and quickly turned off the lights so I could see outside better. The backyard was dark. The side yard was darker. Every shadow suddenly looked like a person. My chest felt tight as I stood there listening. The house was completely silent. Then I heard something. Faint crunch, like footsteps in snow. But it didn't come from the front yard. It came from the side of the house, right outside my window. I froze. The sound moved slowly past the wall. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Whoever it was walking along the side of the house and heading toward the back. I held my breath, barely daring to blink. The footsteps stopped. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard something even worse. A slow scraping sound, right beneath my bedroom window. I stood there in the dark, barely breathing. The scraping sound came again. Slow, careful, like someone dragging their hand across the siding beneath the window. My bedroom window, the one I slept beside every night. My stomach twisted as I realized something. If he was there, he could probably see inside my room. And if he walked a few steps to the side, he would reach the kitchen window, where I was standing. I slowly crouched down below the window frame, terrified he might suddenly look in. The police couldn't come fast enough. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then suddenly, bright red and blue lights flashed through the living room. Police. I ran to the front door and opened it just as the officers stepped onto the porch. My whole body felt weak with relief. There was a man here, I told them. He was outside my house. 2 officers immediately started checking around the yard while another stayed with me inside. For a few minutes, everything was quiet. Then one of the officers walked around the side of the house. A moment later, he came back. But something about his expression made my chest tighten. He looked concerned. "Miss," he said carefully, "do you know the man who was here tonight?" "No," I said quickly. "I've never seen him before." He nodded slowly. Then he gestured for me to step outside. The cold air hit my face as we walked to the front yard. The snow was untouched except for a trail of footprints leading straight to the porch. The officer pointed at them. "These belong to him." I nodded. But then he turned his flashlight toward the side of the house. More footprints. Dozens of them. They circled the house. Along the walls. Under every window. My heart started racing as the beam of the flashlight followed the tracks. They went all the way around the house. Then around it again. And again. The officer looked back at me. "These weren't made tonight," he said quietly. I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" He paused. then said something I will never forget. "These footprints have been here for hours." The beam of his flashlight moved slowly beneath my bedroom window. The snow there was packed down from pacing, back and forth, like someone had been standing there, watching my room, for a very long time. And that's when I realized something even worse. When I first heard the knocking at midnight, he hadn't just arrived. He had already been outside my house, watching me, for hours.